I know selecting text and being responsive to students is critical. A student is not a level, and a book is actually not a level either. It has descriptors, factors that are making it difficult, but what makes it difficult for one student is not what makes it difficult for another student. Oftentimes, one of the most helpful techniques is to chunk the text differently. Rather than reading the whole book, consider what portion you want to start with. Let's consider primary first. If you're thinking about a book that's 8 or 16 pages long, a trade book they might pick up independently, the kinds of trade books we've gathered into Edge, thinking about these books, how would you scaffold a student? I thought about how often I use conferring. And when I work one-on-one, I can uniquely adjust the kind of support a student needs. How do I translate that into a small group work? And in that small group, I'm thinking about my students who need something just a little different to access that book. I'm considering students in grades 1 and 2 for whom text features might be challenging. The book is still designated as a level, but in this book, the narrative isn't hard, but the text features are more complicated. My job then is to understand how to scaffold those text features, partially for the Edge students, but in fact for any way that we as teachers need to know levels, but also be text wise. And when I think about being text wise, it's knowing your students, knowing your books, and not only matching them, but understanding that in this work, how a text is set up offers different challenges for every student. I've taught long enough to know we can't individualize, not with 32 kids in my 5th grade or 28 in my 4th, or even the 20-to-1 ratio that we often have in 1st grade. But I have to consider with one group of kids what might be the hardest part of that book. And therefore, I can't plan a single introduction or the same type of scaffold or even the extensions. Given all of those ideas, what comes up for me is teaching for transfer. What can they do when they're not with you because of how you scaffolded the small group when they were? Now, this independence that we're teaching for from the gradual release of responsibility work that David Pearson, Gallagher, Nell Duke, and many others have done is really critical to the idea that we're always teaching at the edge of their learning and working on independence. If they pick up a similar book in the reading libraries in the classroom and the reading libraries in the school, will they apply and transfer the strategies we've been working on? So thinking about the small group from both a strategies and skills perspective, I might emphasize different parts of different books with individual children. Now, that's possible in conferring. How do I scale up to implementing it in guided reading? So the idea is that this small group has some commonalities that I understand from having worked with them, taken anecdotal notes, really formative assessment, which is what anecdotal notes can provide, observations that make me fine-tune. So I went through a huge number of books and thought about the different scaffolds that we might want for these books, even if the levels are all the same. As experienced teachers and as new teachers, we know that this one book with a designated level, because of the text type, might be a little harder than another book carrying the same label, even the same lexile level. What makes it hard often is factors beyond just the narrative of the text. The layout, how far you read, how the scenes are chunked, how the visuals support or don't support text. And the higher up you go, the more complicated this work becomes. So we looked uniquely in grades K2, and then again in grades 3, 5, and on to 6th grade in some support, ways of thinking about scaffolds in text. It isn't about a new graphic organizer, although there are times those are really important, both for note-taking and for writing. It's about scaffolding the text, not rescuing by doing too much work for the students. And thinking about that concept, the scaffolds are different, as I explained in guided reading, but we've provided what we think are strong scaffolding ideas in teaching cards. that are part of the EDGE program at every level, at every grade, to help kids accelerate and aspire to stronger opportunities to work. It's not about grit. It's about tools. And grit matters, but what makes people able to persevere, kids in particular, is they know they have a tool they can use in their whole repertoire of comprehension and skills. That's what EDGE is all about.